Welcome to Aviation Careers Podcast. My name is Carl Valerian. I'll be your host today. Has your medical been deferred, or do you fear having a deferral? Well, fret no more. Today I have with me aviation attorney Chris Pezalla to discuss deferrals and how to navigate your way through the FAA process of successfully obtaining your medical. If you have a question, by the way, for Chris or for the podcast, aviationcareerspodcast.com/contact. This episode is sponsored by AviatorsClinic.com. AviatorsClinic.com is flight medicine for pilots by pilots. Use the coupon code AviatorsClinic to get a free scholarships guide. By sponsoring us, they actually are giving away 50 scholarships guides in their name. You know, whether you're a student pilot preparing to solo or a veteran crop duster, their goal is to get you into the air and keep you flying. Aviators Clinic understands how nerve-wracking doctors' exams can be. Their goal is to make the process as easy and painless as possible. The Aviators Clinic provides first, second, third class physicals and also BasicMed exams. And also, for those folks with color vision issues, they have an Optec 900, an FAA-approved alternative color vision test. Flight physicals are free of charge for student pilots 17 years old and younger. Aviators Clinic has two convenient locations in Naples and Pompano Beach, Florida. So book your appointment today at aviatorsclinic.com. And we really appreciate them giving away those scholarships guides. Use that coupon code AviatorsClinic to get your free scholarships guide. They're giving away 50 of those. Well, again, today we're going to talk about your medical. Has it been deferred? And now what do we do? And with me today is Chris Pezalla from the All Offices of Robert Strumer. Chris, welcome back to the podcast. Always great to have you on.
Hi, Carl. Great to be here.
You know, Chris, we all fear the deferral. Actually, I don't fear it as much as I used to now that I have a little bit more knowledge. And I think this is going to be a great show to help other people get that knowledge so they don't live in fear of having a deferral. So first of all, as far as the deferral is concerned, the person that's actually doing this deferral is your medical examiner. And I've always heard things like, well, when we talk about it just amongst ourselves, we always say like, oh, I've been denied my medical. And that's not probably what's happening, is it?
Correct. There's actually three things the medical examiner can do. The medical examiner is the first person to see you after you've completed the online application. The examiner can approve the application, assuming that you meet the qualifications for a medical certificate. He can deny it, which is rare. You don't see a denial so often. Or the medical examiner can defer it. And we see that in about 5% of cases where the examiner defers the medical certification.
So the 5%, wow. You know, it's funny because I think in general we think, oh my gosh, it's like 50% or something. It's not true. Some people, I think, say, well, I'm afraid of being deferred. So as far as that's concerned, Now, and I've seen this happen a lot where someone wants counseling and they say, well, my medical's been denied. And how can you tell if this medical's been denied or deferred? How do you actually physically figure that out?
The examiner should tell you whether it's a denial or deferral. And the examiners don't like to be the bad guy. So most of the time, they're going to defer even if they think it's going towards a denial, on the off chance that the FAA's office in Oklahoma City might decide that they do actually want to issue a medical certificate. And also, if they defer it, the FAA's office might be able to provide some guidance on how to get that approved. So denials outright are very rare at the medical exam level.
So, Chris, now I have this, let's go forward with a deferral. I have this deferral, and the medical examiner says to me, hey, listen, I'm going to defer this. So what's next? What do we do next?
Well, in that case, the office in Oklahoma City, the FAA headquarters, is going to look at the medical application. In a lot of cases, they're just going to go ahead and approve it. There are certain conditions that the headquarters has to approve. Regardless of your eligibility, it's always going to be deferred. We see that after a lot of major events, heart attacks, strokes, and other lifetime conditions as well. The second possibility is that the headquarters could look at this and decide that they need more information. And this is very common, especially with things involving substance abuse, alcohol, DUIs, drugs, where they're going to reach out to the pilot and look for more information. And the third possibility, of course, is that they could also deny the medical. We do see that in some cases as well.
When you say they may request more information, if you don't mind, I'd like to dive into that a little bit. like, do I have months? I mean, how does that work? Like, hey, I need more information. Do they call you? Do they fax you? Do they email?
So the FAA will never call or email you. They'll always send you a letter. It's their formal process. If it's super critical, they'll make it certified. Otherwise, it comes in the regular mail. And they're going to ask you for information. One of the questions I get from pilots all the time is, can the FAA see my medical records? And the answer is no. The FAA cannot see your hospital medical records or your doctor's medical records. So if there is something that they need, they're going to reach out to the aviator, to the pilot, to get that information.
Interesting. So they can't. So you have to push the information to them. They can't just go out and look at it.
That's correct. There's very little that the FAA can reach out and get on their own. The only things they can really get on their own are the National Driving Database, National Driving Record, and information from Veteran Affairs. We've seen some of those.
Gotcha. So this is something you'll have to do is keep this ball moving forward. What if you don't actually give them the information they need?
Usually you'll get a second or a third letter asking for the same information. Eventually, though, if they do not get the information, they'll send a letter saying that they were unable to determine your eligibility and that they're not issuing a medical certificate.
Interesting. All right. So so that's that case, is that you give them all the information, you move forward, and they give you your medical and everything's fine. But how about where they actually deny you an actual medical? Now what? What happens then?
So medical can be denied. That is not a lifetime denial. That's just a denial of the present application, which means if the condition is resolved or more information comes to light, you can reapply. And every time you reapply, they will reevaluate fresh with any new information you give them. So if you've been denied, you want to go to an AME expert, one who's worked with denials, and can help you get the right testing and paperwork in order to go and reapply and take another swing at it.
And that resource, by the way, at aviationcareerspodcast.com/resources, there's a company that I use. It's one of a few out there, and they're really good. So check them out. It's in the resources page. There's a lot of other good stuff out there too. And of course, if you need help from an attorney, of course you can call Chris Pezalla, and we'll get you in touch with them at the law offices of Streamer Law. So this denial, you said you can start applying right away, but I'm assuming that you wouldn't recommend doing that right away until you figure out what the actual problem is.
Right. If nothing has changed, you'll most likely be denied a second time. So it makes sense to go and get treated for the condition, and get the paperwork, and then work with an AME expert to figure out what paperwork the FAA will need in order to reevaluate and hopefully improve that application.
So to add to that, Chris, a lot of the career coaching that I do has to do with medical issues. And I will say, when they employ the services of somebody who's an aviation medical expert, things many times will go much smoother, and they can actually make this process easier for you because they're holding your hand along the process there. So really good idea to kind of figure out what they need. And sometimes you can actually get the information is just because there was a mistake in something, like maybe it was your EKG or something like that. So really interesting stuff though. So you can reapply at any time, but obviously you want to get somebody like yourself involved. So if you're doing this reapplication, and you've had a denial, does that hurt you in any way?
If you've had an outright denial, that does limit some of your options because the BasicMed and light sport are no longer available. But if it's just a deferral, and that deferral ends up becoming an acceptance and they do end up issuing a certificate, that does not hurt you. So if you do comply with the process and go all the way through, then that's not a problem at all.
Interestingly, we talked about deferrals. There actually can be a positive outcome, right, as far as deferrals are concerned. So what would be, say, a positive outcome of actually getting a deferral?
So a deferral allows the FAA headquarters to go ahead and take a look at the application, which is important because pilots think that if the examiner approves their medical, that's it, that's the end of the story, and that's not the case. The FAA will review all the files eventually and do an audit. And if there was something in there that should have triggered a deferral, the FAA will now come back to the pilot, and this could be 6-8 months later, asking for that same information. And now it's a crisis. You're into flight training, you spend a lot of money, you maybe have a job offer or you're into a cadet program and you suddenly have your medical in jeopardy. So if you have anything that may need a further review, it's better to do the deferral up front, get through all the paperwork and get an approval right from the FAA headquarters, than to find out later that you just spent 20 grand and now you've got to put your career on hold.
Absolutely, great advice. What most of my clients, and if you go to a good flight school, they'll say to you, hey, listen, make sure you can get your medical. And if you just get your medical history and your ducks in a row and just look at yourself, say, hey, is there something that I may not be able to, or that may stop me from getting this medical? You can find that out actually easily on the website as far as the different limits. So for instance, and we talked about this, you have diabetes. Does that mean I can't get a medical? Well, you can eventually. It may get deferred if you walk in the door with this, but it's something you can eventually probably get a medical if you're working with somebody to work through that process. So it's a great advice. The big thing here is just make sure before you start flight training, you can actually pass a medical. We talked about this deferral as being a good thing for those that are starting flight training, because then you can get all your ducks in a row before you start flight training, making sure you can actually make it through all the solos and stuff like that. But there's another positive, maybe, to having a deferral. We're trying to look at this from a positive viewpoint, is possibility of not getting a revocation, right, from the FAA?
Right. So if you do get a medical issued and then later it's determined that you're not eligible, the FAA will send that to their legal department for a possible revocation action. And now you're into court, and now you're into lawyers. Not something you want to get into if you don't have to. So if you have a condition that might be questionable, it's better to flag that with the AME. And if in doubt, let them defer that to Oklahoma and make the decision on the front end versus having the legal department chasing you down a year later to try to take back a medical.
Interesting. So from philosophically, as far as deferrals are concerned, say you do have a condition that causes a deferral. Say you get a letter from the FAA that says, hey, we need additional information. That's not truly a deferral from your medical examiner, but these are kind of similar there. You have some time to complete this information. It usually says that when you get your letter. But in general, those can be extended from what I've experienced. I'm wondering what your experience has been as far as the amount of time you need to collect this information.
The usual time frame is either 30 or 60 days, depending on what they're asking for. I get asked this a lot, how hard are these deadlines? Certainly as a lawyer, I always try to comply with every deadline, but to be honest, it's not always possible. We have cases where the clients need to go get additional testing, and it may be 2-3 months just to get into the doctor's office. So I tell the clients not to panic about the deadlines. Usually you'll get a second letter requesting the same information. And ultimately, if you're not going to be able to comply with them, it could be 6 months to a year before the legal department comes to take the medical. So if you can't comply with it, the best thing to do is just send back a letter saying that you acknowledged it, you're working on it, and you'll get it done as quick as possible. And the worst case scenario, of course, is they take the medical, and then when you do get all the tests done, you go reapply at that point. So I don't want to tell anyone to ignore deadlines, but I wouldn't lose any sleep over them either.
Absolutely. Having had a lot of experience in this field, usually those deadlines can be extended fairly easily, and you're right. Don't lose too much sleep over that. But here's another part of this. Say you do have a medical condition, and this is more advice to somebody that does have a medical condition that is causing a deferral or the inability for the FAA to issue them a medical certificate. You have to really evaluate whether it is cost effective for you to go forward with the FAA medical. And what does that mean? Like say you actually have something, a condition that actually is going to cost money, quite a bit of money possibly, to enable you to actually get your medical. You actually need to sit there and look at your financial condition and say, okay, yeah, this makes sense for me to work on this. I'll give you an example. Say you're a senior captain at an airline, and you need to spend $5,000 on a medical procedure. That makes sense, right? To go forward with it. But if you're somebody who's just getting started and you're going to see a lifetime of possibilities of medical issues throughout your career, that's when you have to reevaluate. And that's not something you can answer here. We have to do that on an individual basis. But I'm sure that you've probably seen this, where you have people in different stages of their career, and I'm assuming, just like I've had to do, is say, hey, listen, this may not happen. This, just be ready and have another career in your back pocket in case something goes sideways.
We do. We see a lot of folks. We actually see a lot of folks' second career or hobbyists getting into it, and in that case, it may not be worth the cost. So we'll do the best we can to advise what's going to be involved with going through that process. One of the things I'll note is that if you're just flying for fun, light sport works really well. But if you apply for medical and you're ultimately denied that medical, light sport is no longer an option. So a lot of times we advise the clients who are on the fence of being able to get a medical to go try the light sport and see if they like that first before they accidentally give away that option trying to get a medical.
Absolutely. That's some great advice, is just go ahead and start with the light sports, even see if you're interested in this, and then move forward with that and see if it's worth it to go out and get your medical. You'd be surprised, though, as far as what medical conditions you can have and eventually get a medical approval for even a first-class medical. So don't give up if it's something you really want to do. Just remember, sometimes the best path isn't necessarily going and getting your medical, getting deferred. Just like Chris was saying, get all that information together and work with somebody. Work with a counselor, somebody who's a medical expert, or an attorney. So Chris, this has been some really good information. Your medical's been deferred. Now what do we do? Obviously, if you can't get it back and you really think you should have a medical and you have a good case with the FAA, you're going to go to an aviation medical expert. How about an attorney? Is that somebody that you would loop into this process?
On the attorney side, we mostly help folks with personal statements or collecting documents. So this is most helpful with DUIs or substance-related items. If it's something truly a medical condition, an aviation attorney can review your case, but in reality, it's really going to be an A&B expert that you want to engage. So we usually just send those folks over to the best expert we can find and let them take it from there.
Yeah, absolutely great advice. Chris, where can they find you online?
So we're at streamerlaw.com, and actually, I guess I can announce it now. We are in the process of moving our office from Daytona to Miami, so by the time this goes to air, we should be in our new Miami location.
That's outstanding. Well, we're going to come visit. Maybe we'll do a video down to your office next time. That'd be kind of cool just to have a next video. If you have questions, by the way, for Chris, aviationcareerspodcast.com/contact, feedback at aviationcareerspodcast.com. We'll shoot them over to Chris. We'll actually have him back on, do a couple of Q&As. Any other questions, legal or medical, please send them in, or anything in your aviation career. It's been a really exciting time in aviation. Actually, it's always an exciting time in aviation because it is so much fun to be in the world of flying in general. Whether you're a flight instructor or somebody that's looking for the airlines, or you want to fly people down to the Keys in a seaplane, it really is a cool time to be in aviation. Well, Chris, again, thanks so much for being here. I appreciate you coming by, and I hope you'll come back again.
Thank you, Carl, definitely.
And don't forget, if you're looking for those scholarships, guys, we do have a new sponsor, aviatorsclinic.com. Use a coupon code Aviators Clinic to get one of those free scholarships guides. They're nice enough to sponsor this show, and they're giving away 50 scholarships guides. So we really appreciate them there. And they are also in South Florida, so they're really convenient. They're in Pompano Beach and Naples, not too far from the law offices of Streamer Law. Well, folks, one of the things I want you to do is, if you're worried about this, if you're worried about a deferral or your medical, reach out and get some counseling. Go to an aviation medical expert, possibly an attorney, depending on what the case is, or sign up for coaching like we have here at Aviation Careers Podcast. But make sure that after you're done with this, if you have any concerns with your medical or with your career in general, you actually do something about it. And also, don't forget that if you're going to want to move forward in your career, your life, it's not going to happen unless you get up and move and you do something. So I want you to do this. I want you to take one step today to move forward in your career and in your life. Well, folks, we'll talk to you next episode. Safe flying out there.